The thunderous sound of a slap echoed through the small wooden house on the outskirts of Copper Creek, Texas. Lillian Davis flinched as her husband's palm connected with her cheek, sending her stumbling backward into the kitchen table. The year was 1875, and like many women of her time, Lillian had learned that having opinions could be dangerous. "I told you never to question me in front of the mayor," Thomas Davis roared, his face crimson with rage. "You made me look like a fool." Lillian touched her stinging cheek, tasting blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. "I only mentioned that the new schoolteacher might need more supplies for—" Another slap silenced her words. Thomas grabbed her wrist, twisting until she whimpered. "You speak when I tell you to speak, not before, not ever." Through the window, Lillian could see the golden sunset painting the western sky. The same beautiful colors that had once filled her with hope now only reminded her how trapped she truly was. At 24, she had already spent 6 years in a marriage that had started with promises of love and descended into terror. "I have business in town," Thomas spat, releasing her arm with a shove. "Clean yourself up, and remember what happens when you forget your place." The door slammed behind him, and Lillian slid to the floor, drawing her knees to her chest. She listened as his horse galloped away, the sound fading into the distance. Only then did she allow herself to cry. Married at 18 to a man 12 years her senior, Lillian had once believed Thomas's stern demeanor meant strength and stability. Her parents had been so pleased with the match. Thomas had money, land, and connections in Copper Creek. What more could a young woman want? By the time she discovered his true nature, the wedding ring had become a shackle. After her tears subsided, Lillian rose on shaky legs. She splashed cool water on her face from the basin, wincing when it touched the tender spot where a bruise would soon form. She'd become skilled at hiding marks with high collars and carefully arranged hair. The women of Copper Creek never mentioned the bruises they occasionally glimpsed. After all, a man's household was his domain. Lillian looked around the house, a beautiful prison with its polished furniture and curtains she'd sewn herself. The stillness settled heavily on her shoulders. Thomas wouldn't return until late. His business in town usually meant whiskey and cards at the saloon. She knew she should prepare supper, mend his shirts, be the dutiful wife. Instead, an unfamiliar feeling sparked inside her chest rebellion. Before she could reconsider, Lillian grabbed a shawl and stepped outside. The evening air carried the scent of sage and dust. She needed to walk, to breathe, to feel something besides fear for just a few moments. She headed toward the creek that gave the town its name, following the path that wound through scrubby mesquite trees. The water was low this time of year, trickling over smooth stones. Lillian sat on a boulder, letting her fingers trail in the cool current. This had been her sanctuary since childhood, long before Thomas had claimed her as his wife. She closed her eyes, listening to the gentle burbling of the creek and the distant cry of a hawk. "Madam, are you all right?" The deep voice startled her so badly she nearly fell into the water. Lillian scrambled to her feet, automatically raising a hand to cover the mark on her face. A tall man stood a few yards away, leading a dappled gray horse by the reins. He wore a well-worn Stetson, dusty riding clothes, and a concerned expression. Lillian recognized him vaguely, a cowboy who'd arrived in town a few weeks earlier, hired on at the Clayton Ranch north of Copper Creek. "I'm fine," she said quickly, lowering her eyes as she'd been trained to do in the presence of men. "Just getting some evening air." The stranger stepped closer, then stopped when she instinctively backed away. "Name's Adam Osborne, madam. I don't mean to intrude, but—" He gestured toward her face, and Lillian realized she'd lowered her hand, revealing the angry red mark. "It's nothing," she insisted, turning away. "I should go. My husband will be expecting me." "Your husband." Adam's voice hardened slightly. "Would he be the same man I saw striking you in town yesterday, near the general store?" Lillian froze. Someone had seen. Thomas had been careful for years to keep his violence behind closed doors. But yesterday, when she'd spoken to Mrs. Henderson about possibly teaching some of the young girls to read, he'd dragged her into the alley and struck her, hissing that she was embarrassing him with her foolish ideas. "You're mistaken," she whispered, though they both knew it was a lie. Adam removed his hat, revealing sandy brown hair and eyes the color of the creek in summer. "Madam, I don't make a habit of interfering in another man's affairs, but I can't abide seeing a woman harmed. There's nothing to be done about it, Lillian said, her voice barely audible. He's my husband. There's always something to be done, Adam replied quietly. Always. The conviction in his voice made her look up, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. Something in his expression, compassion without pity, caused her throat to tighten. I should go, she repeated, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Good evening, Mr. Osborne. As she hurried back toward the path, Adam called after her. Mrs. Davis, if you ever need help, I'm staying at the old Miller cabin, just past the fork in the creek. Lillian didn't acknowledge his words, but she committed them to memory nonetheless. The next morning, Thomas was in a foul mood. He'd lost heavily at cards and drunk himself into a stupor. His head ached, and he took out his frustration on Lillian, criticizing her cooking, her appearance, the way she'd folded his shirts. We've been invited to dinner at the mayor's house on Saturday, he informed her, as she poured his coffee with trembling hands. You'll wear the blue dress, and you'll keep your mouth shut this time. Yes, Thomas, she murmured, careful not to meet his eyes. The Claytons will be there. That means their new foreman will probably attend too. Thomas drummed his fingers on the table. I hear he's making quite an impression. Mayor thinks he might be useful for our business arrangements. Lillian kept her face expressionless, though her heart quickened. Adam Osborne would be at the dinner. She wasn't sure if the thought terrified or comforted her. I'll be in town most of the day, Thomas continued. The men from Austin are arriving on the noon stage. Make sure my good suit is ready. After he left, Lillian moved through her chores mechanically, her mind elsewhere. Thomas's business arrangements with men from Austin had always struck her as suspicious. Once, she'd overheard enough to suspect he was involved in land fraud, forcing small ranchers off their properties through questionable means, then selling to wealthy investors at a profit. When she dared to question him, he'd beaten her so severely she couldn't leave the house for a week. By mid-afternoon, she'd finished her household tasks. The house was quiet, the air still and heavy with approaching summer heat. On impulse, Lillian reached for the wooden box hidden beneath loose floorboards under her side of the bed. Inside was the small leather-bound journal her mother had given her before she died. Thomas had forbidden her to write, said it filled women's heads with dangerous ideas, but in secret, Lillian had continued to record her thoughts and dreams. She'd just closed the box when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Quickly replacing the floorboard, she stood and smoothed her apron. But instead of Thomas's sturdy bay, she glimpsed a dappled gray through the window. Adam Osborne was riding toward the house. Panic fluttered in her chest. If Thomas returned and found another man at their home, especially one who'd witnessed his violence, the consequences would be unthinkable. She hurried outside before Adam could dismount. Mr. Osborne, you shouldn't be here. Adam tipped his hat. Mrs. Davis, I apologize for the intrusion, but I thought you should know your husband's in town, drinking heavily at the saloon. He's gotten into an argument with one of the Austin men. Lillian's breath caught. How did you know where I live? Asked around. Adam's expression grew serious. Mrs. Davis. Lillian, I've heard things about your husband, things that concern me for your safety. You don't understand, Lillian whispered, glancing nervously down the road. Thomas has friends in high places, the sheriff, the mayor. No one would believe anything against him. Adam dismounted, keeping a respectful distance. I understand better than you might think. My mother lived with a man like your husband for 15 years. I watched him break her spirit piece by piece until there was nothing left. The quiet pain in his voice resonated with something deep inside Lillian. What happened to her? She died before her time, worn down by fear and hurt. Adam's jaw tightened. I swore I'd never stand by and watch another woman suffer the same fate. Lillian looked away, overwhelmed by his intensity. You can't help me, Mr. Osborne. No one can. That's not true. He took a step closer. I've seen how you flinch at loud voices, how you keep your eyes down around men. You deserve better than living in fear, Lillian. Hearing her name on his lips sent an unfamiliar warmth through her. For so long she'd been Mrs. Davis, or Thomas's wife, her own identity slowly erased. But in Adam's voice, her name sounded like it belonged to a person of value. "I should go inside," she said, though she made no move to leave. "The Claytons are good people," Adam said. "If you ever needed somewhere to go—" "Stop." Lillian raised her hand. "Please don't say any more. Thomas will be home soon." Adam nodded, respecting her request. "I'll be at the mayor's dinner on Saturday. If you need to get a message to me, Mrs. Clayton would help." After he rode away, Lillian returned to the house, her thoughts in turmoil. No one had ever offered her help before. No one had ever suggested she might deserve more than the life she had. The idea was both exhilarating and terrifying. That evening, Thomas returned later than usual, reeking of whiskey and rage. The business meeting had gone poorly. Before Lillian could retreat to safety, he grabbed her arm, fingers digging into soft flesh. "You've been talking to people in town about me," he snarled. "Mrs. Henderson mentioned your interest in teaching. You trying to make me look like I can't provide for my wife?" "No, Thomas, I would never—" His fist connected with her stomach, driving the breath from her lungs. As she doubled over, gasping, he tangled his fingers in her hair, forcing her to look at him. "And now I hear Clayton's new foreman was asking questions about us, about our marriage." Thomas's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You been speaking to him, Lillian? You been telling tales?" "No," she wheezed, struggling to breathe. "I don't even know him." Thomas studied her face, searching for lies. Finally, he shoved her away. "See that it stays that way. I won't have my wife disrespecting me." Later, curled on her side of the bed with new bruises forming, Lillian listened to Thomas's heavy breathing. Sleep eluded her as her mind kept returning to Adam's words. "You deserve better than living in fear." For the first time in years, a dangerous emotion flickered to life inside her hope. Saturday arrived, bringing with it a gentle spring rain that cleared by afternoon, leaving the air fresh and the sky a brilliant blue. Lillian wore the blue dress as instructed, carefully applying powder to conceal the yellowish bruise on her cheekbone. Thomas watched her preparations with cold eyes, issuing reminders about her expected behavior. "You'll be pleasant but quiet," he instructed, as their wagon approached the mayor's grand house on the hill overlooking Copper Creek. "If someone asks you a direct question, you'll answer politely and briefly. Understood?" "Yes, Thomas," she replied mechanically. The mayor's wife, Agatha Collins, greeted them warmly, though her eyes lingered briefly on Lillian's face, noting the poorly concealed bruise. "Lillian, dear, you look lovely. We've placed you next to Mrs. Clayton at dinner. I know you two got on so well at the church social." Thomas's hand tightened on Lillian's elbow, but his face remained pleasantly neutral. "My wife is looking forward to the evening, aren't you, dear?" Inside, the house buzzed with Copper Creek's most prominent citizens. Lillian's gaze swept the room, unconsciously searching for Adam. He stood near the fireplace, deep in conversation with Jacob Clayton. Even in formal attire, Adam carried himself with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to open spaces. When he glanced up and caught her looking, he gave her a nearly imperceptible nod. Throughout dinner, Lillian spoke only when directly addressed, feeling Thomas's watchful eyes. Martha Clayton, a kind woman in her 50s, made gentle attempts to draw her out. "Lillian, I heard you have quite a talent for embroidery," Martha said. "Perhaps you'd consider helping with the church altar cloth. We could use someone with your skill." Before Lillian could respond, Thomas interjected. "My wife is quite busy with our household, Mrs. Clayton. I'm afraid she doesn't have time for additional projects." Martha's smile faltered slightly. "Of course, I understand. But the offer remains open should circumstances change." Across the table, Adam watched the exchange, his expression unreadable. When Mayor Collins steered the conversation toward business, specifically the railroad rumored to be considering a route through Copper Creek, Lillian noticed how Thomas's attention shifted entirely away from her. After dinner, the men retired to the mayor's study for brandy and cigars, while the women gathered in the parlor. For the first time in hours, Lillian felt she could breathe. Martha Clayton settled beside her on a small settee, speaking in low tones. "My dear, forgive my directness, but are you all right? You seem troubled." Lillian tensed, automatically glancing toward the study door. "I'm fine, Mrs. Clayton. Just a slight headache." Martha patted her hand. "If you ever need to talk about anything, my door is always open to you. No questions asked." Before Lillian could respond, Adam appeared in the parlor doorway. Several women exchanged curious glances. It was unusual for a man to join the ladies before the gentlemen had concluded their business. "Mrs. Clayton," Adam said, approaching them with an apologetic smile. "Mr. Clayton asked me to inform you that he's discussing the new breeding stock with the mayor and will likely be occupied for some time." Martha nodded, but Lillian could tell this was merely a pretext. Adam's real purpose became clear when he turned to her. "Mrs. Davis, I believe you mentioned having an interest in the mayor's library. Perhaps I could show you?" Mrs. Collins gave her permission. Lillian hesitated, her heart racing. Thomas would be furious if he found her alone with Adam, but the opportunity to speak freely, even for a few minutes, was too precious to waste. "That would be lovely, Mr. Osborne," she said softly, rising from the settee. Martha gave them an encouraging smile. "The library truly is magnificent, Lillian. You should see it before you leave." The mayor's library was a handsome room lined with leather-bound volumes. As soon as they were alone, Adam closed the door partway, leaving it open enough to be proper, but allowing them privacy. "Are you all right?" he asked immediately, his voice low and urgent. "I saw the bruise you tried to hide." Lillian touched her cheek self-consciously. "It's nothing." Adam's expression darkened. "It's not nothing. Did he hurt you because I came to your house?" "He found out you'd been asking questions," she admitted. "But this isn't unusual, Mr. Osborne. This is my life. It doesn't have to be." Adam stepped closer, his eyes intense. "Lillian, I've been making inquiries. Your husband is involved in more than just land speculation. He's been threatening farmers south of town, burning barns, poisoning wells. The Austinites are using him to clear land for the railroad." Lillian stared at him in shock. She'd suspected Thomas's dealings were unethical, but this was criminal. "How do you know this?" "I used to work as a ranger," Adam explained. "I came to Copper Creek tracking the men behind these land grabs. I didn't expect to find—" He trailed off, looking at her with an expression that made her heart flutter. "To find what?" she whispered. "Someone like you," he said simply. "Someone who deserves rescuing." Lillian shook her head. "I can't leave him. He'd find me. And even if he didn't, where would I go? What would I do? I have no money, no family. The Claytons would help, and Adam hesitated, then continued more firmly. "I would ensure you're safe. You have my word." The intensity of his gaze made her look away. "You hardly know me." "I know enough," he replied. "I know you're brave, even though you're afraid. I know you're kind. I've seen how you help the Morgan widow with her children when your husband isn't watching. And I know you deserve a life where you don't flinch every time someone raises their voice." Tears stung Lillian's eyes. "It's impossible." "Nothing's impossible," Adam said gently. "Think about it. If you decide, if you want help, leave a blue ribbon tied to your garden gate. I'll watch for it every day." Voices in the hallway warned them their time was ending. Adam stepped back just as the door opened fully, revealing Thomas. His expression darkened as he took in the scene. "There you are, Lillian," he said, his pleasant tone belied by the dangerous glint in his eyes. "What an unexpected place to find my wife." Adam nodded respectfully. "Mrs. Davis expressed interest in literature, sir. I was just showing her the mayor's impressive collection." Thomas's smile didn't reach his eyes. "How kind of you, Osborne. My wife does enjoy her books when she's finished with her duties, of course." He extended his arm to Lillian. "It's time we were leaving, my dear." The journey home passed in tense silence. Inside their house, Thomas's facade crumbled immediately. His first blow knocked Lillian to the floor. "You disobedient whore," he hissed, looming over her. "I saw how you looked at him, making me a laughingstock." "Thomas, please," Lillian gasped, raising her arms to shield her face. "Nothing happened. We only talked about books." He grabbed her by the throat, squeezing until stars danced at the edges of her vision. "You think I'm a fool? I see how you've changed these past weeks, getting ideas, forgetting your place." As his grip tightened, genuine fear for her life flooded Lillian. Thomas had hurt her before, but never like this. She clawed at his hands, desperate for air. "I should kill you," he growled, his face twisted with rage. "Then no man would ever look at what's mine again." Just when darkness began to cloud her vision, he released her. Lillian collapsed, coughing and gulping air into her burning lungs. Thomas stood over her, straightening his vest with trembling hands. "Pack your things. We're leaving Copper Creek at first light." "Leaving?" Lillian wheezed, still struggling to breathe. "Where?" "My business here is concluded. We're going to San Antonio. I've accepted a position with Mr. Harrington's company." Thomas's voice was eerily calm now. "You'll have no chance to dishonor me there. No one will know you. No one will hear you." As he stalked from the room, Lillian remained on the floor, the full horror of her situation sinking in. San Antonio was 100 miles away. If Thomas took her there, she would disappear completely. Any slim chance of escape would vanish forever. Through the window, she could see the first hint of dawn lighting the eastern sky. Thomas's ultimatum left her no time. It had to be now. Moving silently, Lillian gathered only what she couldn't bear to leave: her mother's locket, the journal, a photograph of her parents. She changed into her sturdiest dress and boots, then crept to the kitchen where Thomas kept emergency funds in a tin behind the stove. The money wasn't much, but it might buy her time. As she slipped outside, a blue ribbon from her sewing basket clutched in her hand, Lillian realized she was leaving everything she'd known for an uncertain future. But for the first time in years, fear of the unknown was less terrifying than the certainty of remaining. With shaking fingers, she tied the ribbon to the garden gate, then melted into the pre-dawn shadows, heading not toward town, where Thomas might search first, but toward the creek and the old Miller cabin beyond. The eastern sky had brightened to pale gold by the time Lillian reached the fork in the creek. Her lungs burned from exertion, and every rustle in the underbrush made her heart leap with fear that Thomas had discovered her absence and begun the hunt. The Miller cabin came into view, a small weathered structure nestled among cottonwood trees. She hesitated at the door, suddenly uncertain. What if Adam had only been kind out of pity? What if he turned her away? Or worse, what if he wasn't there at all, and she'd risked everything for nothing? Before she could lose her courage, the door swung open. Adam stood there, wearing only trousers and an unbuttoned shirt, clearly just risen from sleep. His expression shifted from confusion to concern as he recognized her. "Lillian? What happened?" "He was going to take me away," she said, her voice breaking. "To San Antonio, this morning. I had to leave. I couldn't wait for you to see the ribbon." Adam ushered her inside, quickly closing the door. The cabin was simple but neat, with a small stove in one corner and a narrow bed against the wall. A rifle leaned beside the door. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes scanning her for injuries. Lillian's hand went instinctively to her throat, where bruises were already forming. He almost killed me last night, because he saw us talking." Adam's expression hardened. "Sit down. I'll make coffee, and we'll figure this out." As he moved about the small space, heating water and measuring ground coffee into a pot, Lillian felt the adrenaline that had propelled her flight beginning to fade. Exhaustion and the enormity of what she'd done washed over her. "He'll come looking for me," she said quietly. "He won't let me go." Adam set a steaming cup before her. "Let him come. You're not alone anymore, Lillian." "You don't understand," she insisted. "Thomas has connections, money. He won't just give up." "Neither will I." Adam sat across from her, his expression resolute. "I told you I was a ranger. What I didn't mention is that I've been working with the federal marshal's office to build a case against the land syndicate. Your husband's activities are part of a larger investigation." Hope flickered within her. "You mean he could be arrested? For the land fraud? And for assault, intimidation, arson?" Adam's voice was grim. "We have witnesses for some of it, but we need more. Your testimony could be crucial." Lillian's hands trembled around the warm cup. "I don't know if I'm brave enough to stand against him in court." Adam reached across the table, his fingers lightly touching hers. "You were brave enough to walk away from him in the dark. That took more courage than most people show in a lifetime." The gentle contact, so different from Thomas's bruising grip, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. How long had it been since someone had touched her with kindness? "What happens now?" she asked. "First, we get you somewhere safe, the Clayton Ranch. Martha already knows something of the situation. She's suspected Thomas's true nature for some time." Adam stood, gathering his coat and hat. "Then I ride to Junction City to telegraph Marshal Reynolds. We'll need protection while we build the case. Lillian rose shakily. And if it doesn't work? If Thomas escapes justice? Adam buckled on his gun belt, his movements deliberate. Then I'll take you somewhere he'll never find you. California, Colorado, wherever you want to start over. The sincerity in his voice made her heart beat faster. Why would you do that for me? He paused, looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. Because from the moment I saw you by that creek, trying so hard to hide your pain, I knew I'd do anything to help you smile again. Before she could respond, hoofbeats sounded outside, multiple riders approaching fast. Adam moved to the window, peering through a gap in the curtain. Thomas, he confirmed grimly, and it looks like he brought the sheriff. Fear clutched at Lillian's throat. Sheriff Wilson is his friend. He'll never believe me over Thomas. Adam handed her the rifle. Stay inside. If anyone but me tries to enter, use this. I've never fired a gun, she admitted, holding the weapon awkwardly. Point and pull the trigger. It's already loaded. Adam checked his revolver, but it won't come to that. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Through the window, Lillian watched as Thomas, Sheriff Wilson, and two other men she recognized as Thomas's business associates dismounted. Thomas's face was contorted with rage. "Osborne!" he shouted. "I know she's in there. You've taken my property." Adam stood his ground, thumbs hooked casually in his belt. "Good morning, gentlemen. Something I can help you with?" Thomas stalked forward. "My wife is missing. Tracks led this way. Return her now, and perhaps the sheriff might be lenient with you." Sheriff Wilson, a portly man with a perpetually ruddy complexion, nodded. "Abducting a married woman is a serious offense, Osborne. Best come clean now." "Abduction?" Adam's voice carried clearly through the morning air. "Is that what Mr. Davis claims?" "She's my wife," Thomas snarled. "She belongs with me." Adam's posture shifted subtly. "A wife isn't property, Davis, and a man who nearly strangles his wife has forfeited any right to her company." Thomas's face paled slightly. "You're lying. Lillian would never speak against me. The bruises on her throat speak for themselves." Adam's voice hardened. "As do the witnesses who've seen how you treat her." Sheriff Wilson shifted uncomfortably. "Now, see here, Osborne. Family matters are private." "Assault isn't private, Sheriff." Adam cut him off. "Neither is land fraud, arson, or intimidation. All crimes Mr. Davis here has committed." One of Thomas's associates stepped forward. "You're making dangerous accusations, Cowboy." Adam smiled thinly. "Not accusations, evidence, which Marshal Reynolds will be very interested to see." He reached slowly into his vest pocket and withdrew a folded document. "Including this federal warrant for your arrest, Mr. Davis." Thomas lunged forward, but Adam was faster, his revolver appearing in his hand as if by magic. "I wouldn't, Davis." "This is absurd," Sheriff Wilson blustered. "I've seen no federal warrant." "That's because it's not addressed to you," Adam replied calmly. "I'm deputized by the U.S. Marshal's Office, specifically to investigate the land fraud syndicate operating in this region." Inside the cabin, Lillian watched the confrontation with her heart in her throat. Thomas's expression had shifted from rage to something more dangerous: calculation. "She put you up to this," he said, his voice now eerily calm. "My wife has always been imaginative, prone to hysteria. Ask anyone in town, they'll tell you she's unstable." Adam's stance remained relaxed, but his voice carried steel. "The only unstable person I see is a man who beats women and burns farmers' homes." Thomas's hand edged toward his coat. Lillian recognized the movement he kept a derringer in his inside pocket. Without conscious thought, she threw open the cabin door. "Thomas, don't!" she cried. Her appearance distracted everyone for a crucial moment. Thomas's hand darted into his coat, emerging with the small pistol. But before he could aim, Adam fired, the shot echoing across the clearing. Thomas staggered, the derringer dropping from his fingers as he clutched his shoulder. "You shot me!" he gasped, his face a mask of disbelief as blood seeped between his fingers. "Be thankful I aimed for your shoulder," Adam replied evenly, keeping his revolver trained on the wounded man. He glanced at the sheriff. "Now, Wilson, you have a choice. Arrest this man for assault and attempted murder, or find yourself explaining to the federal marshal why you obstructed justice. Sheriff Wilson looked from Thomas to Adam, then to the official-looking document in Adam's hand. Self-preservation won out. With visible reluctance, he moved to secure Thomas, who continued to stare at Lillian with naked hatred. "You'll regret this," Thomas spat as the sheriff bound his uninjured arm. "No one will want you now. You're nothing without me." Lillian stepped forward, trembling but determined. For years she'd cowered before this man, believing his cruel words, accepting his violence as her due. Now, standing in the clear morning light with Adam beside her, she finally saw Thomas for what he truly was: not powerful, but pathetic. "You're wrong, Thomas," she said, her voice stronger than she'd thought possible. "I was nothing with you. Now I have a chance to be myself again." As Sheriff Wilson and the other men led Thomas away, Adam holstered his weapon and turned to Lillian. "Are you all right?" She nodded, surprised to realize it was true. "What happens now?" "Now," Adam said gently, "you get to decide your own future for the first time in a long time." Over the following weeks, Copper Creek buzzed with the scandal. Thomas Davis and several prominent businessmen were arrested on charges ranging from fraud to attempted murder. Evidence provided by Lillian and others painted a damning picture of corruption that reached as far as the state capitol. Lillian stayed at the Clayton Ranch, gradually regaining her strength and confidence. Martha Clayton became the friend and mentor she'd long needed, while Jacob Clayton treated her with a fatherly respect she'd never known from her own father. Adam visited daily, careful to maintain propriety, but making no secret of his growing feelings for her. They would walk along the creek where they'd first met, talking of everything and nothing. He told her of his childhood in East Texas, his years as a ranger, his dreams of someday having land of his own. She shared her love of books, her secret writing, her hope of perhaps teaching someday. "You could start a school," he suggested one afternoon as they sat beneath a cottonwood tree. "Copper Creek needs a proper teacher. The children would be lucky to have you." Lillian smiled, still marveling at how her ideas were valued now. "Perhaps, when all this is over." The trial was set for autumn, requiring Lillian to testify against Thomas. As the date approached, her nightmares returned visions of Thomas breaking free, finding her, silencing her permanently. The evening before she was to depart for Junction City, where the federal court would convene, Lillian sat on the Claytons' porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky with familiar gold. Adam joined her, respectfully keeping a proper distance. "Are you afraid?" he asked softly. "Yes," she admitted, "but not of testifying. I'm afraid of seeing him again. Afraid his face will take me back to that place where I was small and worthless." Adam's expression was solemn in the fading light. "Lillian, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. "You were never small or worthless. He tried to make you believe that because it gave him power. But even at your most afraid, there was a strength in you that he couldn't touch." Adam leaned forward, his voice intensifying. "I promise you, this you'll never flinch at a voice again. Not his, not mine, not anyone's, because you're stronger than all of us." Tears filled Lillian's eyes at his words, not because they hurt, but because, for the first time, she believed them. "I love you," she whispered, the words escaping before she could consider their propriety. Adam's smile transformed his face. "I've loved you since I saw you by the creek, trying to hide your bruises but still finding beauty in the sunset." He reached for her hand, and she gave it freely, no longer flinching at human contact. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but tonight, sitting hand in hand as darkness settled over the Texas hills, Lillian Davis knew she had already found her way home. The courthouse in Junction City hummed with tension as Lillian took the witness stand. Dressed in a simple navy dress borrowed from Martha Clayton, her hair neatly arranged, she looked nothing like the frightened woman who had fled her husband months earlier. Still, her hands trembled slightly as she was sworn in. Thomas sat at the defense table, his arm still in a sling from Adam's bullet. His eyes burned with hatred as he watched her, but for once, Lillian met his gaze steadily. Behind her, in the gallery, Adam and the Claytons offered silent support. When asked to describe her marriage, Lillian spoke clearly, recounting years of abuse without embellishment. She detailed what she knew of Thomas's business dealings, the threats she'd overheard, the suspicious meetings. Her voice faltered only once when describing the night he'd nearly strangled her. "And why did Mr. Davis attack you that night?" the prosecutor asked. Lillian's fingers unconsciously touched her throat, where the bruises had long faded. "Because I spoke to Mr. Osborne at the mayor's dinner. Thomas believed I had dishonored him by conversing with another man." Throughout her testimony, Thomas's lawyer attempted to paint her as unstable, suggesting she'd invented the abuse to justify running away with a lover. But Lillian remained composed, her quiet dignity more compelling than any emotional outburst could have been. When Thomas took the stand in his own defense, he portrayed himself as a devoted husband betrayed by an ungrateful, mentally unstable wife. He claimed Adam had corrupted her, filling her head with lies. "I loved my wife," he declared, his voice breaking in a performance of emotion. "I provided her with everything, and this is how she repays me with slander and betrayal." During cross-examination, the prosecutor produced Lillian's journal, recovered from the Davis home during the investigation. In it, she had documented years of abuse dates, injuries, a chronicle of terror written in a steady, clear hand. "Would a mentally unstable woman maintain such a methodical record, Mr. Davis?" the prosecutor asked. "Or does this suggest a woman desperately trying to maintain her sanity in an insane situation?" By the trial's end, Thomas's facade had crumbled. The jury deliberated less than 2 hours before finding him guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in the state penitentiary, with additional time possible pending further investigation into the land fraud scheme. As Thomas was led away in chains, he lunged toward Lillian one last time. "This isn't over!" he shouted. "When I get out, I'll find you." Adam stepped protectively in front of her, but Lillian gently moved him aside. She approached as close as the bailiffs would allow, looking directly into her former husband's eyes. "It is over, Thomas," she said quietly. "You have no power over me anymore." For the first time, she saw uncertainty flicker across his face as the guards pulled him away. Lillian Davis had finally spoken her truth, and no one, not even Thomas, could silence her again. The journey back to Copper Creek carried a sense of liberation. Lillian sat beside Adam in the Clayton's wagon, watching the Texas landscape roll past. She was not returning as Thomas Davis's wife, but as herself, Lillian, a woman who had reclaimed her voice and her future. "What will you do now?" Adam asked, as the familiar outline of Copper Creek appeared on the horizon. "Live," she replied simply. "Teach if the town will have me as their school teacher. Write my stories, learn who I am without fear shadowing every moment." Adam nodded, his eyes reflecting the same golden sunset that had once been her only solace. "And where will you live?" "The Davis house is part of my past," Lillian finished. "I've spoken with Mr. Henderson at the bank. Thomas's assets are frozen pending further investigation, but the house legally belongs to me through my marriage. I plan to sell it and use the money to build something new, something that's truly mine." That evening, the Claytons hosted a small dinner to celebrate the trial's outcome and Lillian's return. Several townspeople attended, including some who had once looked away from her bruises. Now they greeted her with genuine warmth, impressed by her courage in testifying. "The school board met yesterday," Jacob Clayton announced over dessert. "They've voted unanimously to offer you the teaching position, Lillian. The children need proper schooling, and your references from back east are impressive." Lillian blinked in surprise. "My references?" "I don't understand." Martha Clayton smiled. "Your former head mistress at the Girls' Academy in Virginia. We wrote to her, and she replied most enthusiastically about your academic achievements. Said you were one of her finest students before your marriage." "You did that for me?" Lillian asked, deeply touched. "You did it for yourself, by being exceptional," Martha replied. "We merely made inquiries." Later, as the guests departed, Adam asked Lillian to walk with him in the Claytons' garden. The night was clear, stars scattered across the Texas sky like diamond dust. They strolled in comfortable silence until reaching a stone bench beneath a flowering mesquite. "I've been offered a permanent position," Adam said as they sat. "The marshal was impressed with how I handled the Davis case. He's asked me to stay on, based here in Copper Creek." Joy bloomed in Lillian's heart. "You're staying?" "If that's all right with you," he replied, suddenly looking uncharacteristically uncertain. I wouldn't want to complicate your new beginning. Lillian considered his words. For so long, her life had been defined by a man, first her father, then Thomas. She'd promised herself independence, a chance to discover who she truly was. Yet the thought of Adam leaving filled her with an emptiness she couldn't ignore. I need time, she said finally. Time to build my own life, to know my own mind fully. But yes, I want you to stay. I want... She hesitated, then continued with newfound confidence. I want to see if what's growing between us can flourish in the light, not just in crisis. Adam took her hand, his touch gentle but sure. I'll wait as long as you need, Lillian. A woman like you is worth waiting for. The following months brought profound changes to Copper Creek and to Lillian's life. The schoolhouse was renovated with funds from a town initiative, and Lillian began teaching 15 children, ranging from 6 to 16 years old. Her natural patience and genuine interest in her students quickly made her beloved among both the children and their parents. She sold the Davis house, unable to bear living, where so many painful memories lingered. With the proceeds, she purchased a small plot of land near the creek and commissioned a modest home, 2 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and most importantly, a small study lined with bookshelves. Adam remained in Copper Creek, but true to his word, he gave Lillian the space she needed. They saw each other often at church, at town gatherings, sometimes sharing Sunday dinner with the Claytons. Their friendship deepened as they discovered each other in this new context, learning to know each other as equals, not as rescuer and rescued. By the time autumn painted the cottonwoods gold again, Lillian had established herself as more than just the woman who had testified against her abusive husband. She was Miss Davis, the schoolteacher who insisted girls learn mathematics as well as needlework. She was the woman who read her stories aloud at literary society meetings, her quiet voice growing stronger with each telling. She was a person in her own right, respected and valued. On the anniversary of her escape from Thomas, Adam invited her for a ride along the creek where they had first met. The day was perfect clear skies, gentle breezes, wildflowers still dotting the grasslands before winter's approach. They stopped at a familiar spot, the boulder where Lillian had sat that fateful evening, trailing her fingers in the water. Adam helped her dismount, then reached into his saddlebag and produced a small package wrapped in brown paper. I have something for you, he said, offering it to her with a smile. Lillian unwrapped it carefully to reveal a leather-bound book. Opening it, she discovered blank pages of high-quality paper. A journal, but unlike the one she'd hidden from Thomas, this one was beautifully crafted, meant to be displayed proudly. For your stories, Adam explained. The bookseller in Junction City said it was the finest he had. Lillian ran her fingers over the smooth leather, deeply touched by the gift's significance. It's beautiful. Thank you. Adam took her hand, his expression growing serious. Lillian, I've respected your need for time, and I'll continue to do so if that's what you want. But I need you to know that my feelings haven't changed. If anything, seeing you become more fully yourself has only deepened them. Lillian looked into his eyes that had never held anything but respect and admiration for her. In the year since her escape, she had reclaimed so much of herself, pieces that Thomas had systematically stripped away. She had discovered strengths she never knew she possessed, built a life she could be proud of. And through it all, Adam had been there, not directing her path, not claiming ownership of her achievements, but supporting her journey with unwavering faith in her capabilities. I love you, she said, the words coming easily now, no longer frightening in their vulnerability. Not because you rescued me, but because you saw me, truly saw me, when I'd almost forgotten who I was. Adam's smile was like sunrise breaking over the Texas hills. Does that mean you might consider becoming Mrs. Osborne someday? Not to replace who you are, but to share who we both are? Lillian laughed, the sound echoing across the water. Are you asking me to marry you, Adam Osborne? I believe I am, he replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Though I'd planned something more romantic than this creek bank. This creek bank is perfect, Lillian said softly. This is where our story began. Adam reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple gold band. It was my mother's, he explained. Before everything. She'd want you to have it. As he slipped it onto her finger, Lillian was struck by how different this moment was from when Thomas had placed his ring on her hand 6 years earlier. That had felt like a shackle closing. This felt like a door opening. "Yes," she whispered, "I will marry you, Adam." They were wed the following spring in the Claytons' garden, surrounded by wildflowers and friends. Lillian wore a dress of pale blue silk, her hair adorned with forget-me-nots. She carried herself with quiet confidence, meeting the eyes of those who gathered to witness her new beginning. When the minister asked who gave this woman in marriage, Lillian herself answered, "I do." The slight departure from tradition caused a murmur among the guests, but Martha Clayton smiled approvingly, and Adam's eyes shone with pride. Their vows were simple but profound promises of respect, partnership, and love freely given. When Adam spoke the words to honor and cherish, his voice carried such conviction that tears sprang to Lillian's eyes. These were not empty promises but a sacred commitment from a man who had already demonstrated their meaning. The Claytons hosted a reception at their ranch, where townspeople who had once whispered about Thomas Davis's difficult wife now toasted the new schoolteacher and her martial husband. Children from Lillian's school presented her with a handmade quilt, each square representing something they had learned from her, not just reading and arithmetic, but courage and dignity. As evening approached, Adam led his bride away from the celebration toward their new home near the creek. Inside, he had arranged one final surprise, a proper writing desk placed in the study window, positioned to catch the morning light. "For your teaching plans," he explained, "and for your stories." Lillian touched the smooth wood reverently. "Our children will grow up hearing stories," she said softly. "True ones, about a woman who found her voice, and a man who taught her she need never flinch at words again." Adam drew her into his arms, his touch gentle yet sure, and they'll know their mother's strength firsthand. In the years that followed, Lillian and Adam built a life that neither could have imagined on that first evening by the creek. Their home expanded to accommodate 3 children, 2 daughters, and a son, all raised to speak their minds and respect others. Lillian continued teaching, eventually establishing a proper academy that educated both boys and girls in subjects previously reserved for male students. Adam's work with the Marshal's office helped bring stability to the region as Texas continued its sometimes turbulent growth. When he was away on assignments, Lillian managed their household and land with competent independence, though she always welcomed his return with joy. Thomas Davis served his sentence and was released after 12 years, a broken man with no friends and no prospects. When word reached Copper Creek that he had appeared in a nearby town, Adam rode out to meet him, not with threats but with a simple warning. The past was over, and Lillian was protected by more than just her husband. Now she had an entire community that valued her. Whether it was Adam's words or the sight of the confident Marshal that Thomas's former victim had married, no one could say, but Thomas moved on, drifting further west and never troubling them again. On warm evenings, Lillian and Adam would often sit on their porch, watching their children play along the same creek where their story began. Sometimes she would read aloud from her latest work, for she had indeed become a published author, her stories of frontier women finding unexpected strength resonating with readers across the country. "Did you ever imagine this?" Adam asked one such evening as their youngest daughter chased fireflies in the gathering dusk. "That night when you ran away?" Lillian leaned against his shoulder, secure in the knowledge that this was a touch that would never hurt, a voice that would never make her cower. "No," she admitted. "I could only imagine escape, not happiness. You gave me the chance to discover both." Adam kissed her temple gently. "You gave yourself that chance, Lillian. I just opened the door." As twilight deepened into night, Lillian Osborne, teacher, writer, mother, beloved wife, gazed at the stars appearing above the Texas horizon. The same stars had witnessed her darkest moments of fear and her greatest triumphs of courage. They had seen her silent and speaking out, cowering and standing tall. Most importantly, they had watched her transform from a woman who flinched at every raised voice to one who raised her own voice in classrooms and town meetings, in stories and songs, in laughter with her children, and in love with her husband, and she never flinched again.